Yo, 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 welcome to Crate 808, and today we return to our ongoing series discussing the greatest 3 album runs in 90s hip-hop. So, next up, we're talking about one of the best rap groups in history, Tribe Called Quest, with a friend of the pod, DJ, promoter and writer from Southern Hospitality, Rob Pursey is in the house. How are you doing, Rob?
Oh, feeling great. Feeling amazing to be here with you, Cam.
Mate, I'm enjoying that background for the YouTube viewers.
You like that? I had to make a little effort because I had to put up the 12 inches from those 3 albums we're going to be talking about, and the albums there, and there's an early 12-inch there, and just in case I don't come correct, people can just look at the pictures.
I like it, man. It's sick. It's sick. I could just fanboy over that for a while. But Rob, man, nice to have you on. We're talking Tribe today, man.
Yes.
I know last time you were on, we've talked, Rob's been on before, so please check out the vault of episodes we've got. We talked Jay Electronica's latest album.
Did, yeah.
Well, at the time, latest. And obviously, yeah. And we talked Outkast as well a while back. So today it's Tribe. I mean, with this run, man, let's just talk about this run, because we've done De La Soul, we've done Pac, we've done Cube, we've done others before this. But today, 1990s People's Instinctive Travels, 91 Low End Theory. I could do an hour on that.
Yeah, really, really.
And 93's Midnight Marauders.
Yes.
Rob, you got me feeling confident, man.
I'm feeling like supremely confident. I think this run is bulletproof. I think that's the word I'm looking for. I can't see any chinks in the armor of this run at all. So I'm feeling ecstatic to have been given this one. Thank you, Cam. I appreciate it.
Rob, love that. Okay, bulletproof. Okay, well, before we jump in, before that, can I just say a little bit of housework for everyone? Go get involved with this chat we're all having. Go on the socials, crate808.com. You can email crate808@gmail.com as well. Email us in your thoughts. And also, YouTube watchers, subscribe and like, please. And just keep in touch with what we're doing. But Rob, before we do that, least hip-hop thing in the last 24 hours for yourself, my man. What has it been?
I cut back the garden. That's probably it.
Will you listen to beats whilst you were doing it? I found gardening a lot better.
Listen, my life is a perpetual soundtrack. In fact, this conversation might be the only time in probably the last 40 years that I've not got music on in the background.
Mate, I think that's fair play to you. Fair play to the family for letting that happen, because I get rinsed for 7 a.m. beats. It's like, no, not the time, but I like the way you're going, man.
It's always the time.
Always the time. So without further ado, Rob, man, we've heard all these other run arguments and debates for why they should be in. Why do you think Tribe Called Quest's 3-album run from the 90s is the best one from that era?
The main reason, and like I say, I mentioned the word bulletproof already. I feel like we're talking albums here, and Tribe crafted albums. And what they did with those albums, on each album, they had a sound, and then they tweaked the sound, and they perfected the sound. And for me, that's what an album's all about. It's not about multiple producers. It's not about multiple features. It's about your sound entering that world. And the moment People's Instinctive Travels and the Paths of Rhythm dropped, you entered a Tribe Called Quest's world, and they never let you out. They never let you out, but for those first 3 albums, you were fully locked in. It was a tight unit. There's no outside involvement. It was just the purity of Fife, Q-Tip, Ali Shaheed, beats, rhymes, impeccable. Impeccable.
Yeah, I have to say, of all the runs that we are going to be talking about, I agree with you on this. The fact that these 3 are possibly the best examples of cohesion, as you've just said.
Cohesion, yes.
And that extension of that is sequencing, I suppose. I think these are 3 albums that have that absolutely nailed. So I agree with you on that point for sure.
I feel that when you listen to these 3 Tribe albums, you don't, there's nothing that takes you out of your zone at all. We've all talked about this, haven't we, on Twitter and everywhere else, like classic albums with like one, you know, Aquemini has Mamacita, and it kind of takes you out of your zone a little bit. I'm firing shots at whoever's doing Outcast in a minute. I don't know who's getting those shots off early. But things like, there's nothing on these 3 albums that takes you out of your zone. I mean, some may argue there is on the first album, but I'm going to argue there isn't. I think that's the main thing. You enter Tribe's world, you stay there for the duration, and then you just rinse and repeat.
I love that, man. Because just before we jump into the first album, People's Instinctive Travels, one thing I wanted to just put out there for context-wise, when this album came out and before Tribe really made it, for me, one of the best things about Tribe is it's an you know, there's different types of music that push forward genres, and I feel like you can extend on top of what's come before you, or you can evolve what's come before you. And I think Tribe are one of the masters of evolving a sound that incorporated a lot more different sounds and genres than just James Brown or breakbeat or even just jazz. It isn't just jazz. Obviously it's jazz, heavy on jazz, but there's a lot of different genres in here, man. People's Instinctive Travels, man. Tell me, 1990, where were you when this album dropped? What did it mean to you then? What did it mean, and what does it mean to you now?
I can tell you exactly, but before we do, I think it's important that we just talk about the kind of setup for that album. So you had Q-Tip obviously appeared on the first Jungle Brothers album, on the promo, but on the 12-inch. And he's also actually on the song In Time, which is almost like just a remake of the promo that people forget. And it was on a UK 12, and I'm getting a bit nerdy now. But I feel like that's important. So this voice of Q-Tip, we've kind of heard it. Also, I feel like Buddy as well, of 3 Feet High and Rising, was the setup as well. So there was a lot of things kind of bubbling through A Tribe Called Quest. We kept hearing about this group, first of all, you know, and Q-Tip was the figurehead. We didn't know anything much about Fife before the Buddy remix. We didn't know much about Ali Shaheed, but it was just this thing. And even the name, A Tribe Called Quest, it was like, are they a collective? Are they It was unusual at the time, you know. At the time, it was, you know, Super Lover C and Casanova Rudd, Eric B and Rakim, Cash Money and Marvelous, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Big Daddy Kane, Cool G Rap. A Tribe Called Quest? I mean, is it a group? What is it? And there was genuinely that feeling. Certainly, I'm speaking for myself there, but I think that was just intriguing straight away. As a young, impressionable kind of young teenager, I was like, what is going on here? I'm already into this hip hop stuff, and tell me more. You know, it gave me that feeling of curiosity. So by the time the album was about to drop, I mean, it wasn't like now where we have an overload of information and we know literally when things are dropping to the minute, and we have a discourse before, during, after. You know, it was. I went to the my mum took me shopping. I'm going to go personal here.
Let's go.
Shopping to the Metro Centre in Newcastle, which was like an early shopping centre.
Can I ask you, Rob, the Metro Centre, did that have a roller coaster in it?
It did have a roller coaster in it.
I've been to the Metro Centre. I've been to the Metro Centre.
That is mad. It's John Hall who, like, you know, was involved in Newcastle United at the time.
For sure.
He owned the Metro Centre. And yes, it did have a roller coaster in it. So if my mum was saying she's going to go shopping, it was like, okay, I don't really want to go shopping with my mum, but there's a roller coaster, and B, I might be able to parlay going to a record shop as part of this. So anyway, and I remember going to the record shop, and the 2 albums that were in there that I wanted to buy were Ice Cube, America's Most Wanted, and People's Instinctive Travels. And at the time, I was the biggest NWA fan, and I was caught up in that whole I was reading the Source magazine, Hip Hop Connection magazine, and
Yeah.
I bought the Ice Cube because I was like, I've got to get the Ice Cube, and I didn't have multiple funds, so I couldn't buy the Tribe. But I remember looking at the cover, and it's right behind me now. Actually, it's here, and I remember looking at the cover and feeling like it's like fascinating. How this is a reissue one now, but I remember thinking it's fascinating with all the stuff. So even though I bought the Ice Cube, I spent longer in the shop looking at the Tribe Called Quest cover. And then incredible. A couple of weeks later, when I had the money from, I don't know, doing a paper round or something, I then bought the Tribe Called Quest. So that was my way in. I was still looking for that Ice Cube, like hard, fast, aggressive, Public Enemy, Big Daddy Kane, Set It Off style hip hop. And a Tribe Called Quest, I kind of knew wasn't going to give me that. So it was a new thing I needed to get used to.
So a precursor to Tribe at that time for you is probably Della, right? Della are probably like little bit earlier. Sorry, go on.
Jungle Brothers, really. Jungle Brothers
for sure.
And I feel like Jungle Brothers really unfairly get written out of history with the native tongues thing. It was really Straight Out the Jungle, and obviously, as I mentioned, the promo and In Time, and that was very much my introduction to Q-Tip. But then, obviously, 3 Feet High and Rising, like changed my life. As for a lot of people of my age in the UK, 3 Feet High and Rising was just everything, So any association to that album was, we want to know who everybody is. We want to know who Prince Paul. We knew who Prince Paul was, obviously Stetsasonic, but we want to know who Tribe Called Quest are. We want to know who all these characters are in this kind of world that De La Soul have brought us. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because what you said there, I wasn't around at that time to be getting them at that time. But what I do remember is there was a lot of hard rap, just a lot, like you just said, a lot of hardcore landscape, really hardcore, which went on to get harder. But the fact that Tribe maintained in those same years as rap was getting harder with Wu and people like that, Tribe were just maintaining. And what was it now that I think actually that reminds me? I was listening to Tribe this morning in preparation, and there was a line I caught from Tip. There's loads of lines that you just catch over and over again for me anyway. And he says people seem to bug because the beats are hard but gentle. And I just remember thinking at that time that must have stuck out a lot for you. What was the difference between someone? What do they bring differently to Della and Jungle Brothers? Like, what was it about these guys that really was on point for you?
I felt like they were like De La Soul and Jungle Brothers because they had that esoteric, abstract, slightly more earthy vibe, if that makes sense. If you're looking at the other stuff I was listening to at the time, whether it was Public Enemy or Ice-T, someone who was, Big Daddy Kane seemed otherworldly. Big Daddy Kane seemed like, I don't know, like I would never meet Big Daddy Kane on the street. Whereas De La Soul, I could imagine meeting on the street. A Tribe Called Quest, I could imagine meeting on the street. And they were like, these people seem, I don't want to say the word, like kind of just a bit more accessible in a way. They just seemed more regular. And it was it was kind of regular rap, where until that point, a lot of rap was shirt off, gold chain on. I was a northern boy in Darlington at the time, thinking, Ice-T. I'd never met an Ice-T, but I might have met a Q-Tip.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the subject matter, isn't it, and stuff as well that they're talking about. So I think that's one of the things I cottoned onto as well. So, like when you're looking at the first album as it has come out now, I was thinking, talk about like aiming for greatness. First of all, talk about sticking out. They start with a 7.5 minute track with a birthing sequence, mate. Like, you're like, hold on, what is happening right now? And then I think they even sample, and this is one of the reasons I really enjoy hip hop generally, as it's a young person's game. The assuredness and confidence of young people making music like this.
Yes.
The fact that there's no coincidence for me that they're like even sampling Sergeant Pepper at the start of Luck of Lucian, and that those horns, when those come in, I feel like they're saying we aim to be the Beatles of this shit, like
I think what we know about Q-Tip now is we know Q-Tip is a true like artiste, muso. He's about the art, isn't he? I mean, his career has never said otherwise. You know, he's not really sold out ever. He's always done things willfully and randomly. And I think looking back now, that was clear from the onset that Q-Tip particularly, and I don't want to discredit Ali Shaheed also, they had a vision. And it was, like you say, right down to the artwork, down to how they wanted to present themselves. Yeah, it was there from the onset, no question.
Because I know we're going to talk about Fife later as well down the line in the other albums. He's not so much on this record.
No.
But I was thinking, just for you, which just favourite, preference-wise, which one do you actually prefer out of the two, or do you not have a preference?
Out of the two rappers?
Yeah, when they're just spitting, so it's not like no beats. It's just
I mean,
like, yeah.
Q-Tip. I think as we talked last time, Q-Tip is in my top 5 MCs of all time because, and that is no disrespect to Fife whatsoever, because I absolutely love Fife Dog, like with all my heart. But if I hear Q-Tip's voice on a record, whether it's on, you know, a Janet Jackson record, or it's on a Mint Condition record, or a Lucy Pearl record, or a Tribe record, or a Del the Funky Homo Sapien record, I'm just like, it's never anything but 10 out of 10 to me.
Yeah, I love Tip. I
think it's a tone thing.
Okay, yeah.
I think it's a tone thing. I love that kind of nasally pop to his voice that he, and that same with early Jay-Z had the same thing, not so much now. And Big L has the same thing. And Ghostface kind of has the same thing, a little harsher, but I look for that in rap, and Q-Tip is the embodiment of that. So
yeah, absolutely is. When you hear, there's something just smooth about that voice, to be fair. I mean, a lot of people have smooth voices, but there's something, I don't know, there's a character to his. And I feel like with Tribe generally, mate, I was going to say, I couldn't really, as a youngster, I couldn't really nail why they were so different to me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know much about sampling. I didn't know much about drum patterns and stuff like that. I just remember thinking they're just a different rhythm. Like it just feels like a different rhythm to anything else I'm listening to.
It's the rhythm devoted to the art of moving butts. That's what it is, as they said themselves. And when we move on to Low End Theory, they perfected that. The rhythm devoted to the art of moving butts.
It's true, man. The melodies, the melodic, the melodies are on this first album. I feel there is still that they're in there, and I feel like their messaging is so much more like upfront at times as well of what they're actually about, because they're trying to introduce themselves. If you were looking at like rewindables of this album that you feel, I don't know, it's very hard to pick out 3 classics like rewindable tracks.
Yes.
But like, what sticks out to you still today? Like, what do you still rewind today?
The songs whenever I play this album, I think, I need to play People's Instinctive Travels. The song I always go to first is Footprints, because that is the Tribe Called Quest. I love that. I'll talk about this more when we get to Low End. That dusted forward motion. It's just otherworldly for me. I keep using that word. That record, I just think, how did they make that? I don't understand it. That's the one that feels mystical to me on the album. I think it's important that we talk on this album that I feel the singles on this album are not misleading to the album, but whereas the other albums, they're very, they place well in the album, whereas the singles from this album are different. So if you think about the first single was Description of a Fool, which is kind of just like a Roy Ayers loop. And it's very, very different really to a rest of it. They hadn't quite perfected that sound yet. It was like, okay, here's an idea, Description of a Fool. It's a bit of not a gimmick isn't the right word, but a bit of a gimmick, a bit of an idea for a song. Because people forget that in the late 80s, you still sometimes needed a song to be about something. It might be about the Vapors, if it was Biz Markie, or it might be about, a Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. Parents just don't understand. So people had like song concepts in a way that kind of went a lot in the 90s when it was just like, Compton's Most Wanted have 4 albums about drive-bys. So
yeah.
I feel like then you had description of, and then you had I left my wallet in El Segundo, which is another like a storytelling rap, you know, which is in the kind of Slick Rick style, telling a deep story and quite non-commercial, you know, not really a hook on the record, just a sort of 3.5-4 minute song about losing your wallet in El Segundo. I mean, it's kind of random.
Who else is rapping about that? Do you know what I mean? Like, who else is saying, "Oh, I lost my wallet," and that's it? And then obviously, you know, it's about a woman, and the fact that, I suppose, another thing that does like, it just basically makes them stand out a little bit is their approach to women, I suppose, on these albums. If it is there, it's through love, or I know we're going to talk about other tracks they've got on here on the other albums, like Date Rape and stuff like that. There is going to be other things they go into, but on this album, it is very much, well, native tongues, isn't it? And I feel like when you were saying there about El Segundo, again, a rewindable, I would say it's a classic. Like, I still love listening to that track when it comes on. I don't tend to switch it. It's more. What's the word? It's not overly complicated, if you know what I mean. Like, it is stripped back. No, it's not. It is stripped back.
So those first 2 singles, Description of a Fool, I Left My Wallet in El Segundo, were very, like you say, uncomplicated. The samples weren't meshed together. It was pretty much loops. They were rhyming over loops. And then obviously the third and the huge single from the album, and again, people of my age remember this, Can I Kick It was a monster, very much like Me, Myself and I for De La Soul, that kind of overshadowed the album and actually became a thing in itself, you know, with the Walk on the Wild Side sample. And so there's a lot of people, kind of your average person who's not a rap fan, who will only know A Tribe Called Quest from this album, simply because of Can I Kick It? In the same way that there's a lot of people who only know 3 Feet High and Rising, and they'll be like, what, De La Soul had other albums? They didn't have, you know. It's hard. Obviously, we live in a very hip-hop centered world, and it's hard to imagine that. But there are genuinely people, particularly in the UK, who know those 2 albums and know nothing else from those 2 groups. You know, Can I Kick It? Me, Myself and I Know I Love You Better, and that's it. And that's crazy.
It is crazy to think. I mean, this is 1990, man. So hip hop now is massive, but back then that must have been really strange to be seeing stuff that high in the charts here.
I think this is the point. This record came out in an environment. 90 was a strange time for hip hop, because I think that's important, because obviously 88 you had hip hop kind of blew up a little bit, and you had songs in the UK charts, and you had things like Public Enemy would chart, Eric B and Rakim would chart, Rob Basin, Easy Rock would chart, and you'd have like the one-off hits like Tone Loc, Wild Thing, Funky Cold Medina, you know. And then hip hop kind of slipped back into away from the mainstream as rave culture particularly took over in the UK. And then so you have groups like A Tribe Called Quest, you get the odd single, but really it wasn't like now where the average person was checking for hip hop. You know, it was a select few people, you know. You kind of knew, especially in a small town where I grew up, you kind of knew everybody who was into hip hop, you know. You couldn't just have a conversation with someone about, you know, Kendrick Lamar, you know, like you can now. It was different. It was very different.
Yeah, that's it. I suppose that's just really interesting to someone like myself listening back and thinking. I mean, Can I Kick It is infectious. It's an incredible pop song as well. One of the things I love about Can I Kick It is, and we haven't really talked about the production like exactly as these albums go on, but with that, one thing that maintains with Tribe, I think every Tribe head is the same, is the drums, man. The drums just pierce through in every.
I feel like that record doesn't get played anymore, Can I Kick It? But when you hear Can I Kick It on a big system, man, that record absolutely knocks.
Yeah.
The drums are insane on that record. So it's one of those that, because it feels almost cheesy, people don't play it. But whenever I do hear it, I heard it at Carnival a few years ago, and I had a moment where I was like, oh my
Oh,
God, this record
it's actually
is amazing. Like,
It is. It
you know,
is. Yeah.
it was like hearing it for the first time again.
I love that. Well, I love it, especially when it happens with a cheesy pop hit. You know, you think, oh, actually, I now see why it's a pop hit. And Della did similar things. Going on to other rewindables that we have, I know I do like. We've talked Luck of Lucian. I do like that, even though it's slightly against French people, like they are taking the piss a little bit. I feel. One of the other ones I love, and I'm not sure if it's a rewindable as much as more of a hidden gem. You talked there about rave music coming out here and becoming really big. I really enjoyed electronic and dance music. Rhythm is a stunning track.
Yeah,
and that's got that house vibe to it. It's got a kind of house vibe to it.
That was coming off what obviously Jungle Brothers had I'll House You. And if you look at the second Jungle Brothers album done by the Forces of Nature, which I feel like is a very, very overlooked album and was kind of the setup for a lot of this stuff that came afterwards. That had a lot of that vibe on it, like Beyond This World and things like that. And that for me is where a Tribe and Jungle Brothers at the time were neck and neck and very similar with what they were doing. Almost like Q-Tip hadn't fully come out of the shadow of Jungle Brothers yet.
That's interesting.
That's how I feel. That could be that could be off the mark. He may have influenced them. I don't really know, but that's how I perceived it as a listener. Once I heard Low End Theory, I was like, oh, okay, now they have totally their own thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the very, very apt comparison there, man. Is there any tracks on here, for want of another word, like hidden gems that you feel like maybe deserve a bit more shine on them?
I love Mr. Muhammad.
What a track.
I love Mr. Muhammad. And I was going to also say, I love Luck of Lucian. I mean, just like the PC-ness aside, I feel like that's definitely one of my favorite records. And you know what? Again, this is another just early, like a loop record. And weirdly, I think Q-Tip came back to this later in his career. You know, we've all seen the footage of Q-Tip with the needle drop, you know, where he's just needle dropping and making loops. And on the last album, the Renaissance, kind of came back to it. I love Pubic Enemy.
yeah. It's Pubic Enemy is another one of them where, like you said there, it's they're light, they're dancing, but they also have a message. So it's almost like you dance whilst you listen to conscious messaging, if you know what I mean, with Tribe. Yeah. And I feel like Pubic Enemy is fun as well. Like that's another thing. Tribe are fun, man. Like they're joyous.
I think this is another thing to remember. I wonder if have you ever seen the film CB4 with Chris Rock?
Oh, I love CB4, man.
So do you remember in CB4, A Tribe Called Quest? Obviously, the joke of CB4 was that Chris Rock was in a kind of pseudo NWA.
Yeah,
I'm hard, and they in that film they also pastiched different quote unquote trends of the time. So they had the classic "I'm black, y'all," "I'm black." Y'all, I'm blackity black and I'm black y'all. You know, based on the whole Afrocentric movement. And they also had a Tribe. They were sort of mocking A Tribe Called Quest at the talent show. And I remember Q-Tip I remember reading this in the source at the time, being really annoyed about this at the time because it was like, no, we aren't a joke. We aren't just hippie dippies. Very similar to what we've heard about Della Soul a million times. You know, and, you know, Mace having to beat people down. But I remember that at the time they were. It was seen as not a joke, but a bit like, oh, look at these guys, aren't they quaint in their or whatever it might have been, and you know, so it was seen as light. I think the word you used was light, and I think it was seen as light. But as he said, the beats are hard but gentle, and I think that lightness was the sprinkling, the imagery, you know, but the actual heart music. There was nothing really light about it at all.
Yeah, isn't that what another line that stuck out to me a few months back when I was listening back was Fife, and he said something very similar. He was like, the ills of the world make the situation brighter. They are still talking about the shit that's going on. They're like their world. 100%. It's not great, but it's just, you know, we're trying to make it brighter at the same time. Just one more I was going to ask about... youthful expression. What you thought youthful expression? Because that for me.
Hang on, why did I not mention that when you asked me for the deep cuts? That's probably, apart from Footprints, that's my favourite song.
Yeah, man, it's one of them where talk about rewindable. That is, and I don't know many people who talk about it, so I hope more people do go listen to that after hearing this. But one thing on that, it's just the smoothness to Tribe. They don't have any jarring samples or left-hand turns, or do you know what I mean? It's just a really mellow journey, but also kind of makes you dance. So yeah, it's
that people don't talk about it. Do you feel that people talk about this album enough?
Great question, man. Every time I bring it up in a conversation, people seem to go, "Oh yeah, what a great album." It's not like people don't say, "Oh, I haven't heard it." I think people have heard it. I definitely think they haven't heard it as much as the other two, because the other two are much more of in the mainstream, I would say, that people like.
But in hip hop circles, this is what I was saying earlier. I feel like the average person may have heard this album more than the second album, and I think it's also important to note at this stage that the Source gave this album 5 mics.
Yeah. First one, wasn't it? First one ever.
It was one of the first. I was either this or brand. It must have been this. I think it must have been this. Yeah.
It's up there anyway. One of the early ones.
Yeah, they gave this 5 mics right out the gate, and they actually didn't give Midnight Marauders 5 mics. I think this is the thing that people get twisted. The first 2 albums were considered 5 mic classics by the Source, and Midnight Marauders actually wasn't considered a 5 mic classic by the Source at the time. It got 4 mics.
Not even 4.5.
Which seems insanely harsh, right?
That's what happens. Is you don't want them to get the hat trick of 5 mics, because then you're glutton for punishment, man. Like, who else is going to get that? Do you know what I mean?
This is it.
Before we move on to Low End Theory, and I'm sure a chunk of this pod is going to be about the album, because it's a shame. It's shameful that we haven't even had this album on yet, and we've been around for 2 years. So Low End Theory, let's go.
That. Wow.
No, I know. I want to cover it. I want to bring it to a debate.
You should just do a conversation with yourself. A conversation with Cam meets Cam. Cam.
Yeah, just talking about...
Cam on Cam on the Tribe Called Quest Low End Theory.
Yeah. I'd listen to it. So Cam listening to Cam.
Stand me up.
But one thing I did want to jump into before we move on to Low End Theory, all these, as you've said there's reissues and there's remasterings and there's deluxe issues come out over these years and decades. Thoughts on the alternate tracks on Instinctive Travels? I think CeeLo, J. Cole and Pharrell did 3 different mixes. What did you think on those?
Oh, you mean they had that sort of what year would it have been? Was it 25 years? Was it 2015 maybe?
Yeah, I think it was around that. Yeah, I think it was.
You know what? I mean, I have a running joke with everyone who follows me on Twitter. Like, I love to make. I've been getting these J. Cole jokes and hate off from early. From early. Listen, I invented that. I invented that J. Cole. Let's say J. Cole remix. But what I will say is the J. Cole remix I actually quite like, because he did a kind of early Tribe thing. It was kind of a loop. It kind of worked. You know what? That was one of those things where I'm like, oh, don't bother remixing anything from here. What's the point of this? Now listen, and I was like, yeah, this is okay.
They're not bad,
and I enjoyed the Pharrell too, because obviously Pharrell is such a Tribe Called Quest native tongue stan.
Yeah,
he's never going to get that wrong. He's going to take more time over that than he is a Justin Timberlake record. You know, I mean,
yeah, absolutely, 100%. Well, Low End Theory then, Rob. Low End Theory, man. Tell me again about this album. You're probably a massive Tribe head when this comes out. At that point, I'd have thought. What was the impact like, man? When it came and dropped off?
Again, I'm sorry to do this. I've got to just set it up again.
I feel absolutely.
We talked about the singles off the first album, how they were slightly misleading to how the rest of the album sounded, whereas Footprints and songs like that were a bit more fitting to maybe you could almost squeeze that on Low End Theory. I think it's important that the B-side to Can I Kick It was If the Papes Come. Now, If the Papes Come, there's 2 versions. There's the version just with the group on, and there's the version with Africa Baby Band from Jungle Brothers on. And If the Papes Come, for me, was the first hint we had at that low end, pure jazz infused. I remember listening to it thinking, this is very, very different to anything I've got. It's not as light. It's darker. It's more low slung in the mix. It's very like dusty and just a bit more grimy, a bit more earthy, a bit less kind of musical, if that makes sense. And when I say musical, I mean like melodious. It's more raw and it's hard hitting. And I was like, oh, this is just. And when I first played it, I wasn't sure. And that was like all great hip hop songs. Like J. Rue the Damager, Come Clean, or Just Ice Cold, Getting Dumb. You hear them and you go, what the hell is this? Then 3 plays later, you're like, this is better than everything ever. You know? And like, it was one of those records for me. And so by the time I bought the single Check the Rhyme, I was like, yo, this is, I like this group already, but they were well down the tier. It was like, De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, then Tribe were here. Check the Rhyme. The moment Check the Rhyme came out, neck and neck, you know, straight away. The video on the top of the building, Large Professor, I was a huge Main Source fan, and a Large Professor just laying on the speaker, and I was like, everything I like is coming together in this. The cover for the Check the Rhyme single, it's probably behind me somewhere here. Let me find it.
There we go.
You know, the cover.
Boom.
You know, the cover was even more kind of regular looking. It was like, okay, here we are. You know, the people, we're here now. They're not hiding behind the imagery of the first album. You know, the first album, you know, it's got imagery. They're not on the covers of the record. I was like, okay. So this for me was like a Tribe Called Quest. We're here.
It's almost like a conscious choice. Like, right, how do we move this on? Right, let's become like us. And I find that's interesting, man. The artwork generally, the Low End Theory artwork is possibly one of my favorite artworks of all time. So, and everyone, and that's the thing. I think they think about the complete package a lot. You're saying there about Check the Rhyme, one of the best beat drops in history. Unbelievable.
And it's really strange because on the 12-inch, there's actually 3 different versions. And to start with, I didn't play the album version all the time. I played the other versions. There's one where it's got like a sort of a light flute in it, and there's one that's like a weird kind of, you know, it's a different groove again. And I was like, which is the one? And like, obviously now we all know the classic, you know? And again, also on the 12-inch is Sky Pager, which again was another song in that same mode as If the Papes Come. Very militant, very bass-driven, very pure, and not at all light and happy-go-lucky. And I was like, come on, bring it on. Bring it on.
Because Sky Page is another one, a rewindable off this album. Check the Rhyme. But that Sky Page was hard. Like,
hard record.
Like, really, hard. Like, that beat, man. Like, you could put that on in, like, you know, if there's a Club Subterraneous kicking off and there's that all thugged out classics jumping off, you can drop Sky Pager in there. I reckon it'll work, man. So
well, I think that's something that's important to I love the way you picked up the quote on the beats are hard but gentle. At the time, I thought A Tribe Called Quest were music you listened to at home, or you know, I didn't really think it would be club music. And I remember hearing Bugging Out for the first time. I went to the Soul Weekender as a way too young. I shouldn't have been there. And got into the Westwood room, and he was playing stuff like Ultramagnetic MCs and Pete Rock, The Creator. And I was like, yeah, this all makes sense. And he played Bugging Out. And I was like, yo, I had no idea this was like a club record. This is insane. And it was just knocking. And like my heart was like booming out of my chest. And I was like, it was like a proper light bulb moment, you know?
Yeah. I love that. I love that story. That's how you heard it with that. Because that's sometimes how you realise a track works, is if you hear it like that. I think before we move on to the album generally, Bugging Out as well, talk about visuals. They're definitely on the visuals with that, with the video. I mean, Fife's emergence on this record is possibly one of the strongest arguments you can have for this being a classic. And I think Fife on here, the one thing I loved about this, because I didn't really know much about Fife until Bugging Out, I suppose, it felt like someone was just rapping a stream of consciousness to me. Like, it's not... Has he written this down? Like, he's just talking. He's just saying things almost. But it is perfect. And one of the things that really cottoned onto me, and this is talking from a man below average, just below average height, right? So anyone who keeps banging on about the fact they're a 5-foot assassin, or like if they're constantly like, he's self-deprecated loads. He's called himself a 5-foot assassin, but he's on some roughneck business, and he's never had a cavity. Who talks like that, man? Like who
love that. So we are favorite MCs at the time, Fife and Guru, because for some reason Guru always mentions that he's 5'8" and like 3/4 or whatever it is.
It's true. Like, it really helped people like with the condition out. Like if you got a complex about your height, listen to Guru and listen to Fife, because you'll be all right, man. You'll be all right. But this is it, and this is what Low End. I want you to tell me why you think what had changed from the first album to this, and you've said there about the harder, deeper bass. But as a group, what do you think changed in that? Apart from Five, when Five came up, what was that for you? How did that feel when you heard that?
It's focus, and we have a unit now. It's not. There's no clear leader anymore. Whereas the first one was definitely led. It felt led by Q-Tip coming off the Jungle Brothers. Yeah. He was the dominant voice. It felt like it was in his vision. Whereas this one, it was, when you listen to it, it was like we have 3 creators in a basement, making this magic, and that's how it felt. And you can't separate the parts in this. It's one, it's whole. And even from, the way it opens with Excursions, it's just, I mean,
just stop there. You've won. Stop there. You said Excursions, so.
See, I think if the Papes come, Excursions, Vibes and Stuff, that is the Tribe I love. That Sky Pager, that low driving. It's just it just takes me somewhere. It just absolutely takes me somewhere.
Well, influenced Dre. Like this, I've heard more than 2 or 3 sources say the same thing. That Dre heard this, the Low End, and was like, right, I'm gonna do something similar, and he went and took that another way. So
he did that another way by doing the live instrumentation with the Chronic and making sure that Low End was knocking in a kind of in a West Coast kind of summery vibe, but it was similar. It was similar.
When you're saying there, before we jump into Excursions, there's one little, and I am by no means a music critic, so I have no idea if there's terms for this out there. But one thing that I think that, and I cottoned onto this earlier, that Tribe did this a lot. It's a technique they use. It's a trademark for me for Tribe, but they do it better than anyone else I know, and that's cutting back the track so it just emphasizes and isolates the vocals. Very simple. But Check the Rhyme does that. What is an unbelievable track? Rap Promoter, all these tracks. There's so many that Tribe have done where they just and they go and they come back in. They'll just, and that propels the music for me. Where,
it's confidence. I think that's what this album sounded like. It was the sound of confidence. It was like, I'm just going to have this beat and I'm going to cut it totally and just give you the tone of my voice saying a bar, a statement, and that will resonate with you.
Yeah.
And you know what? It did.
yeah, clearly did. If you can tell me about Excursions, I would say Excursions for me is one of, personally, it's probably my favourite opener to any album of all time.
It's my favourite opener of Tribe albums, and it's probably top 10 openers for any rap albums for me.
Yeah, it's incredible. But to say that, mate, Excursions is incredible. It sounds traditional yet new to me. Yeah. It sounds like, and again, that echoes you can't forget the rhyming. Yeah. My mind was blown as a kid. You know the moments when someone words something or you see something illustrated to you and you finally get it. And when he said, my daddy says that all things go in cycles, this reminds him of Bebop.
The way that Bobby Brown is just playing like Michael. Oh, come on.
And as a massive Michael head, I was like, oh yeah, Bobby Brown is doing that.
Like Michael, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a kid. So I'm a kid. No one's told me this before. Then I realised, what was the past is still now, and this will be something else. And I feel that cyclical nature thing really kicked into me off of Excursions. So I find that fascinating. But also, great opener, mate. One of the best closers. They've got Scenario.
Like, it's hard to explain. Again, it's important to note that I bought this record on vinyl at the time, and the vinyl was missing a few tracks that were on the CD. So I wasn't aware of a few tracks until later.
Right.
But Scenario as a closer, I mean, it's hard to explain. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's a list, isn't it? We've often done the best album openers, and people talk about Doggy Style, Dynasty intro, Meat Mill Dreams and Nightmares, and DMX, and this maybe. But album closers is important, and that's Scenario. I mean, insanity.
And do you know what? Actually, do you know what I really loved about Scenario as a kid? Because obviously you'd have I didn't have vinyl, I had CD. It was as the what again, as not the what as that finished, and you were really into that groove, and they're cutting out the beat and all that, and then the transition. The transition is one of the best transitions. And as a kid, you have to rewind a little bit on the CD player just to get the transition. And, man. And then, obviously, we're talking posse cuts. And I don't know, if a posse cuts for you, is Scenario up there for you in posse cuts wise?
I mean, 1,000%. Obviously, I run the event Hip Hop Karaoke. And one of my best moments was, we've had people perform that loads of times, but Dwelle came through to Hip Hop Karaoke one time, and Dwelle was like, I said, what song do you want to do? And he's like, Scenario. And I was like, I don't know why I was patronizing Dwelle. I was like, do you need any help? Because I can get someone to like, and he was like, no, I've got this. And he did every single voice, and he was changing the inflections in his voice. But obviously when he got to Buster, the whole crowd were like, we were locked in.
Yeah, that is amazing. But that's the infectiousness and fun, and talk about a karaoke. That's a perfect karaoke track, man. And the remix as well, obviously. But like, which one do you prefer actually out of the two? Do you prefer the remix or do you prefer the
I
OG?
think simply because I've heard the original too many times. The one I would reach for now is the remix. However, you just can't look past the original. You just can't. It's churlish to say the originals, and it made Buster because, again, at the time, Leaders of the New School came out. They'd been out, I think they had like maybe one single out, maybe two. One single at the time. Case of the PTA.
Yeah.
I thought Charlie Brown was the star. Charlie Brown was the star of Case of the PTA.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. Oh, maybe this other guy, Busta Rhymes, is the star. And that was confusing to me because I'm old enough to remember this in real time.
Yeah.
And there was a time where they were like neck and neck.
Wow.
And, there's that famous footage on Your MTV Raps of them falling out, Leaders of the New School in front, Fab Five Freddy is interviewing them and they're kind of having beef, and go and Google that one. But
it's amazing. Yeah.
I remember me and my friends thought Charlie Brown was going to be the first star, but Buster was like, no. Trevor Smith, he got there and he was like, listen, now is my time.
Yeah. And I mean, there's not much more you can probably say about that verse than most people have already said, but I think it's odd. I don't think there's many people I can trace back a whole career in one verse. Like any other, I'm trying to think, Jigger or Buster,
Nicki Minaj.
Eminem, Nicki maybe, Nicki's probably, but then again, she took that. Yeah, she took that from Buster as well and elevated it. But yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. And I think like for me it was like that rowness of it all. I don't know if it was just me, but I ended up getting a lot more into Onyx and a lot more that rowness, that came out.
That's interesting because Onyx came a year, like 92, a year later. And maybe that Buster I mean, listen, the end of 92 and most of 93 was row row central to the point where I was like getting sick of it. It was like every chorus was like a chanty chorus. It was like, bitch ass bootlegger, oh, you get your leg broke. What? And it was
what a story.
exhausting. Like, I mean, I'm wearing my hieroglyphics chain right now.
Oh, boom.
When Hyro came out and they weren't just chanting, I was like, thank God for that. I was like, you know, every group was called Mad Flavor or, you know, Rumpeltilskins, and everything was chanting. And people remember 93 as a very innovative year, but if you actually look at a lot of those albums, like Midnight Marauders, Balloon Mind State, Wu-Tang, Doggy Style, they all came out post-September. Most of 92, 93 after Onyx was like, oh, yeah, come on, oh. So maybe
so we can blame Buster.
Responsible for that.
Yeah, Buster. God, man, I love that verse, but come on, man, you gave us 6 months of that.
At least 6 months, mate. It felt like longer.
It felt like longer. I love that. But no, it wasn't Horror. It was, well, Souls of Mystery for batting practice like that. That is, it could be that, but it actually is a different version, you know. And I feel they molded that completely different.
Pure rhyming.
Yeah, they actually rhyme. Yeah, but mate, actually, we talk about rewindables and hidden gems on this album. Very hard to on these last two because I think everyone in our circles kind of knows them back to front. But one of the most rewindable moments for me as a kid and being a geek and trying to understand what sampling was, just was Minnie Riperton, man. And when you have that, it's not a song, it's a moment. But on Lyrics to Go, when you realise, oh, that's her voice. Oh, that's an instrument. And it literally becomes that. And that is a moment just embedded in my brain as a kid of, wow, just incredible.
For me, on a Low End, we all talk about the singles. I feel like the singles on Low End were very representative of Low End in a way that they weren't for people's instinctive travels. So a record, obviously, Check the Rhyme is very representative. Scenario is the scenario. And, you know, jazz is very representative. You know, jazz is behind me here. It's very representative. And there was the remix of jazz that people forget, which was very, very similar record to Gangstar, Credit is Due, where they've got the kind of crashing jazz sounds that were really being used at the time. Whereas there's so many other hidden gems on the album, like Butter, which I feel like is Fife's real kind of moment where he came into the world.
Absolutely.
And my personal favourite, well, I've got two personal favourites.
Go on.
Verses from the Abstract is...
Love that.
And you talked earlier about the way that Bobby Brown is just amping like Michael, things go in cycles. There's a line on Verses from the Abstract which really helped me as a human. And I know it sounds really kind of corny to say this, but verse where he says... and it was one of those moments where they cut the beat off, like you said. So it was like, listen to this moment. The thing that men and women need to do is stick together. Progressions can't be made if we're separate forever. I hook the funky beat with the funky singing by Miss Vinia Mojica. And that whole verse, I've got goosebumps talking about it now. It still gives me goosebumps where it's like, because the butt naked streaking through the ever murky streets of the urbanized area. Blasting out the system is the hip hop hysteria. And I'm just like, at the time, I was just like,
what is it?
Again, it renders me speechless because it's so, that's where music goes beyond dialogue for me. It goes beyond dialogue and it becomes a feeling. And I no longer can express myself because it's love. It's not a criticism anymore. It's love. And when I hear that, and it's exactly the same with Vibes and Stuff, which wasn't on the vinyl version. Because there was only a single vinyl version at the time. It then got reissued on double vinyl. So it was only on the CD. So I didn't hear that until I bought the CD. And it's the whole thing where Fife goes, he builds up to the chorus and it's, I say, peace to MC Trouble, rest in peace. And then that jazz sample drops and it's like, again, I've got goosebumps just talking about it. And this is why, of the three, this is always going to be my favorite. I'm going to lay my cards on the line even before we get to Midnight Marauders, because those moments for me, they just again, I'm going to be talking on this podcast, but I'm struggling, Cam.
No, I think what it is about Tribe, though, it's very hard. Because it becomes that. It becomes a personal... I think with Tribe, more than most as well, it does become very personal. It's about where you were at that time and that vibes and stuff, feel for it. When you go back and you hear it again and again and again, a sign of a classic is getting those different things and realising, like, again, vibes and stuff... When that electric guitar, or there seems to be, like, it breaks down... Like in the middle, that one.
Yeah.
And I just kept thinking of Kanye, and obviously Kanye's been influenced by this run, but I just kept thinking that's almost so on the nose of a use of that kind of breakdown that it's just normal now. And Tribe made that normal, and that there was nothing like it before that for me.
It was pure precision. It was like what Large Professor, Main Source album had dropped earlier in the year. And for me, that was the first time you got that sampling precision, like a record, like Looking at the Front Door. If you break the samples down and Looking at the Front Door, and you think, they've made this whole that is, I can't understand how a brain processes putting those samples together that make this whole. In the first Tribe Called Quest album, I could hear the sample. In this, I can't hear this. Yes, I hear the sample, but it's part of this now. So I can't separate the two things. It's so precise. It's mind-blowing to me. That's mind-blowing to me.
That's what I was saying about the one of the best examples of evolution. Yeah, so before 100%. You can hear that sample and you hear the extension of what's come before. And I feel with Tip and Ali Shaheed, all of them really, as a package, it was like, oh, you've layered 4 different, well, maybe more, I don't know, but lots of different genres, and you've now made this. And that for me was like, oh, now this is what we're doing now. Like, this is what's going to happen. And it's interesting when you said that.
That's a beautiful summary. I've got nothing more to add to that.
Well, thank you, man. I mean, this is it. And I feel like if we talk about, just to go on to like peers, as at the same time, Primo's doing his thing, Dre's doing his thing, Pete Rock's doing his thing. And I remember hearing a while back, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but they were talking about jazz, and Pete Rock insists that was actually his cut. I'm not sure if you've heard about that, but I was like, interesting how peers were still like influential on Tribe at this point. I think by the time you get to Midnight Marauders, it almost becomes peerless, as in we're just gonna do this now. But one hidden gem before we move on to Midnight Marauders for me was Everything Is Fair, mate.
Everything Is Fair. It's amazing.
Again, that production.
Again, we forget, because Tribe have become so iconic in the culture now, we forget these gems because Check the Rhyme is so massive, a War Tour is so massive, Can I Kick It so massive, whatever it is.
For sure.
These albums are wall-to-wall gems. This is why this is probably the greatest 3-album run, because these are not only gems, we've got gems that elevate within the gems,
Yeah.
Another one. It's just another tone. But it's a tweak of a tone, which makes it so beautiful.
That's so true, man. That's so true. That sample on that track alone just doesn't feel like it should work, but they just make it work, and that's, again, moment of genius, man.
Before we move, can I tell you my first rap concert I went to?
Yes,
was the Low End Theory tour in 1991. At Newcastle, it was at Newcastle University.
Yeah,
I'd been to one show before as a kid. I'd been to the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, Television is the Drug of the Nation, Michael Franti. I went because in Newcastle, in Darlington, Newcastle, where I was from, you didn't get many rap shows. But I went to see 2 shows in the same week at the Union for Newcastle University. Got the train up. You went to the Union. I saw Nirvana at the time of Nevermind.
What?
And I saw A Tribe Called Quest. Now, A Tribe Called Quest, it was a rainy night in Newcastle. There was about 80 people at the concert. So this is when you sometimes see me on Twitter talking about revisionism. Like this, A Tribe Called Quest were not big in Newcastle at the time. There was about 80 people there. And again, this is when I had a massive revelation, because I did not realize just how incredible Q-Tip, Fife, and Ali Shaheed were live, and how hard this music was live. And I was like, the back and forth, the synergy. So I bought the album a couple of weeks before. And so this is like September, October 91 time. And whenever it came out, October, November. When did it come out? Yeah, September, October, I think. And it was just insane how hard it was. And Q-Tip was rocking that mic. And I was like, oh, he's like a Big Daddy Kane. He's like a, And I was just, me and my friend, we were just like wiling out. Like it was the best thing we'd ever seen in our lives. And I remember Public Enemy, Can't Trust It from Apocalypse 91 was their single at the time. And they freestyle for 10 minutes over that beat. Q-Tip just going, this is my shit. This is my shit. And he just kept playing that beat. And freestyling. And he was like, you know, I know not many of you came out tonight, but we're going to give you a goddamn show. And I was just like, never stop, please.
That is fascinating, man. 80 people, they're freestyling with Public Enemy.
I'm being kind by saying 80.
Mate, that's amazing. Midnight Marauders, though, right? We're going into Midnight Marauders now, talking about one thing, especially the week we've been recording. There seems to be this all over my TL, mate. Low End Theory or Midnight. And I think you can verge from everything we've said. I'm low end. One, I want to know which one you are out of the two, and two, why?
I'm low end, and I actually saw John Schechter mention this. And I think the other day, big up John Schechter, founder of the Source magazine. Big up. No one knows this better than him. If you're like, it's like about a 4 or 5 year difference in age. I mean, I think we have about that difference in age, but we are both low end, because I am low end too. But generally, I think if you're now sort of late 30s, as opposed to early to mid 40s, I think you can almost do a 50-50 split. Most of the older ones will go Low End Theory.
Yeah.
Most of those just slightly younger go
Midnight
Marauders. And I think that's the general rule of thumb. I think you're slightly breaking the rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I think that's the general rule of thumb.
That's interesting, man. Because, I think it probably is that. And I think Gangstar has similar arguments to be made, and people talk about that. So. And I feel like, to be fair...
Hard to Earn is the 5th best Gangstar album.
Oh, Dart Adams out there right now is going to be having a word about this. I know, because everybody said something similar, and I'm like, that's my favourite Gangstar album. But I might have revised that over this run, by the way, because one of the best things about these runs that we're talking about is going back and listening. And
yeah.
Do you know what? I think Step in the Arena might be my favourite Gangstar album. It's not even in the run.
I've been saying this. Come on, Carl. I've been saying this.
That is incredible. Mate, I know. Me, you, and Sade. I think Sade's favourite hip-hop album is like Step in the Arena. So those three. I think Sade loved Step in the Arena, that she had it in her collection back in the day.
Listen,
so I'm in.
I mean, I arrogantly think my opinion counts for something, but ignore me. Listen to Sade. That's what we should have T-shirts made of us. Is ignore me, listen to Sade. Listen,
but
that's an idea right there. Public knowledge, me and you, 50-50, let's go, Cam.
I'm in, man. I'm in. So 93. So that's three. So I know 3 years is a long time in rap, but they dropped 3 albums.
2 years.
2 years, sorry. 2 years, yeah.
Because it was like about September 91, the first one. And obviously it's November 93, isn't it, when it came out. So it's just over 2 years.
That's a very compactful. We talked about Tupac having such a short time to hit such amazing run. Midnight Marauders.
It felt like a long time at the time.
Yeah. So what did you think then when Midnight Marauders dropped? Where were you at? And like how did it impact you as a listener?
Well, again, I was a singles buyer, and by this time I had Yo MTV Raps So I saw the video I bought the single for Award Tour, which is somewhere behind me there.
There we go. Nice.
And I bought that, and I'd seen the video, and it was for me, Award Tour, I'm going to be controversial here.
Okay.
It's one of my least favorite Tribe Called Quest songs. It's
okay.
I'm going to caveat that by saying it's still a 10 out of 10 rap song.
yeah.
You know what I mean? But
yeah,
one of my least favorite because it has a different kind of groove and a drop than I like. I like the beats to shuffle at the bottom end, whereas this one is almost the sound they then went towards with beats, rhymes, and life, with the snare and the kick being a bit more prominent rather than the bass line being a bit more prominent. So that's just a minor thing. But that was the setup for me. But I wasn't disappointed. Then on the B-side, you had the Chase Part 2, the version with Consequence. And I was like, oh, okay, this is dope. And I wasn't disappointed, even though I was like, maybe I don't love this as much as I loved Check the Rhyme. But I was like, come on, bring it on.
What was the what did you think was the difference between this and Low End? Like in those years they'd changed? Like how had they changed for you?
I feel like Q-Tip was just a much more prominent figure in hip hop. He was, like you say, if they weren't accepted on the first album, if they were slightly outsiders on the first album, and even to the point of Chris Rock having a joke at their expense in CB4, I feel like on this album, Tribe were part of the hip hop landscape. They were embedded, fully embedded. And I think the album cover was their signifier for this. It was like, we are the culture.
Yeah.
You know, look, the culture is around us.
Yeah.
We are the culture.
Just classic.
We've still got our, character on the front. But look, this is where we are. We are the heart of hip hop. Hip hop is around us. We've got Beastie Boys here. We've got, Kid Capri here. We've got whoever's on that album cover. We are the culture.
And I think that idea of moving as a collective was, and because again, Woo around the same time, that collective feel, it felt like there was these collectives in rap now that almost like wrestlers or football teams or something like that you know what you're going to get. And one thing is, again, the emblem of the guide on the covers, again, they're keeping it cohesive, as we've said before. Like everything in this timeline seems to be that way. And also for me, I feel like on this album, what they definitely hit their apex as a group dynamic, if you get what I mean.
100%.
I think this one is where they're so, like, at this point, I think Fife and Tip are just equal on Midnight.
I think that's absolutely fair. I think this is the album where I enjoy Fife's verses as much as Q-Tip's all the time. And maybe even more on a couple of records. Maybe even more, which I would never have said on Low End Theory.
Damn, okay. I mean, that is it, isn't it? And that's the thing where I feel like when it's interesting where they go after this album, but when they drop this, for you, in your favourite rap groups, a Tribe, like, actually, not even then, now, like, where do Tribe rank in your favourite rap groups?
I think they're always top 5. At the time, when this dropped, rap groups, probably number 1.
Yeah.
That exact, them and De La Soul, neck and neck at the time. And probably at the time, the excitement around this album and how much I love Low End Theory, I'd say they may have been number 1 at this exact moment. I think as time has gone on and as I've grown to follow groups and different albums, and they may not be number 1 for me now. As a group, I'll be honest, like I might put Outkast and De La ahead of them, and 3-6 and other things, but they're always probably top 3.
It's because of that.
Top 3 are probably Outkast, De La Soul, and a Tribe Called Quest, and on a different day, it could be a different group. But at the time, yes, probably number 1.
Yeah, I would say that as well. It was them and Woo for me that were like the
Yeah.
ones, and they were so different. You didn't really kind of compare them.
That's
But
right.
like, and I think that's another thing that they do go on to do. Where I don't know, like when you look at this album and you look at like Rewindables and Hidden Gems, this is one of them albums to me that I used to play back to front and not really think about tracks at the time. It's really odd. They all seem to mesh together, and it becomes like again, like we said again, you know, body of work. They nail it with this, maybe even more than Low End, as in this has that guide throughout the whole thing where you're kind of like, oh yeah.
That's a really good way of putting it, because the first album, quite all over the place. You've got some different tempos, like you even mentioned, almost like disco tempos at times on the first album. Second album, it still had songs like Everything Is Fair, Scenario, which kind of stood out. Even Show Business with Diamond D and Sadat, and kind of stood out as a slightly kind of hip hop. They were a bit more like hip hop of the day. Whereas this album, you're right. You know, even down to the voiceovers in between every track, the female link, you can't really pick a track. If anything, a War Tour might be the only one that stands out a little bit.
Yeah, no, good shout.
Slightly more feels slightly more tempo.
Yeah, yeah. And it's so early in the listing as well. So it makes you feel like, oh, I'm on a journey, but hold on. Then you really get into the journey.
Yeah.
One of my rewindables is We Can Get Down, because for me that is one, put it on at a party, it's gonna bang. That's like peak. Again, we talked about the drums before, but on this it's almost like this is their peak of like using those drums for me, and the horns are incredible, and Fife. And then at the end of the track, Ali Shaheed Muhammad's scratching. So what I'm talking about as a group coming together as an apex, that Can We Get Down is one of the, We Can Get Down is one of the ones where I feel like they illustrate that amazingly.
I can never separate that song now from DJ Mr. Thing. He did a routine with that song, with the kick, snare, kick, hats.
Yeah.
Snare, and if it wasn't already a perfect song,
yeah,
DJ song, rapping song, Mr. Thing then elevated it to that level of like, this is why we love A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
The synergy in that record is just almost unrivaled in hip hop, I would say.
It's unreal. Would you what are your rewindables and hidden gems, mate? Do you have any for this album?
Well, even though it was a single and it's super obvious, Electric Relaxation is perfection. I put that alongside Looking at the Front Door, in the sense of a song that main source, a song that is actual sampling perfection and rhyming perfection and just EQing. And I think we have got to mention the engineer, Bob Power.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
You can't not mention Bob Power, you know, just like you can't not mention Jimmy Douglas with Timbaland. You can't not mention whether it's The Dream and Tricky Stewart or, you know, whoever it is who's engineering, though, you know, whether it's Brian Big Bass Gardner for those early Ruthless records. Yeah. The engineer, I mean, so significant that, you know, Q-Tip shouting him out on records, you know? Shouting out the end, Bob Power, you there? You know?
Yeah.
So definitely Electric Relaxation. I absolutely love Sucker N. I mean, it's a controversial song, you know, but musically, the way it drops in, it's just, that's pure hip hop. You know, if you've got an alien beamed down to to like, you know, London, and we say, what is hip hop? That'll do. Play them.
Sucker Ends. Love that. I love that. I mean, Sucker Ends is amazing. I do remember going to and fro and actually thinking, like, what's the message? Like, what's the message? And it's like, the message is very much in the hook. And again, the hooks on this album are incredible. Let's not sleep on those hook writings that they do. But like, I feel like, Sucker Ends is one of them where you can't play it in public as much as you want it to, but even the beat is killer, because people look at you and go, why have you put this on? Listen to the beat. No. You know, so it's a bit complicated on that sense, but I love it. Oh my God. Obviously everyone talks about Oh My God, but I think there's something about oh my god, where you realise these guys can do it on so many levels. They can do your deep album cuts, they can do your singles, they can do a feature on the hook, and those horns again. You know what? Again, another little rewindable moment I love is the horn stab. They do a little horn stab in the first verse, which just makes it for me. It's a little embellishments that maybe people don't get, but us nerds, we sit there and we're like, hold on a minute, how did he do that? And yeah, do you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm here for that.
You know what? At the time, it was so cohesive that you almost didn't think about it. Whereas now I hear music and I instantly might go to who sampled or whatever and think, and someone will talk about a sample. It was like, the cohesion was so intense that it was, you almost didn't think about it. It was like, yeah, that's theirs now. That mini Ripperton is theirs now. That is, they owned it. And I think that you know, we're talking about 3 album runs here on Crate 808. But can I talk about within the 3 album run? Can I talk about a run of tracks that I just, for me, from Electric Relaxation, you got Electric Relaxation, Clap Your Hands, Keep It Rolling. I'm going to have to just check. The Chase Part 2, Lyrics to Go, God Lives Through. Like, I literally could. Someone actually find a gap or a moment in that run of tracks that I would change. I really couldn't.
Yeah. Again, that sequencing, bro. Jeez. Absolutely stellar.
Even the God Lives Through, where they bring back the oh my God refrain, and it's like
yeah. That again, always thinking about the finished
package.
I've
got beef with that run as well. Large Professor says on Keep It Rolling, where he says, buy that album when I drop it. And I took him at his word. And that album never dropped. So, it did come out eventually as like a bootleg and a reissue. But I think that's maybe why I always put Low End ahead, because I think that lyric scarred me. Because it's like, Extra P, you promised me. You promised me, bro. Like,
yeah.
You know, you don't break your promises. This is a trap album.
I know, it's true. But same as Dre, though, watch out for Detox just in the middle of a track. And you're like, oh, just stop. Just stop.
Yeah. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
Yeah, that got ridiculous, to be fair. I'm kind of glad I never dropped that in the end, actually. But again, and it just a personal favourite line, and I know everyone loves it. I didn't know who Mario Andretti was, mate. I don't know what a Momo was at the time, but ludicrously speedy and infectious with the slow-mo is like, I love that. I kind of describe my football like that. Like, I'm not speedy at all, but you know, I like that. I love that.
When you're in that Teddy Sheringham slow-mo zone,
you know. But yeah, man, again,
ludicrously speedy, and that's the thing. You know, this is why Q-Tip is in my top 5 MCs ever. He will take words like that. Like speedy is the kind of word that someone's grandma would say.
Mate, this reminds me of one of my...
Sounds cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool. This reminds me, it was actually on the first album, but you know when they're talking about, oh God, my mind always goes blank at a time when I need it the most. Description of a Fool, right? This is no word of a lie, it's actually happened, and we were in the kitchen, and I had idiotically misplaced the mayo, right? And this is a true story. I was like, I'll try and look for it, and my wife was getting more and more angry. She was getting more and more
That
hungry.
would be beef in my house.
Yeah, right. And so I'm glad you understand that. And I was listening to Tribe, and as I opened the cupboard I hadn't opened for the last 15 minutes, and it was sitting there, literally you hear Tip at the background going, "You were big galoot, you nincompoop." My wife was just like, that is timing of the best timing ever. And two, I was thinking, in what other hip-hop track has anyone ever used galoot and nincompoop? You know,
where the description of 12 is. There we are. Look,
have you got it?
The description
of there it is.
Right here. So next time you see that, you can picture this and say the line.
I love that, Rob. I love it, man. But yeah, no, what you said there, use of language as well. Like this run is... Yeah, I mean, when we first started, just to, caveat, I'm not trying to be biased, but when we first started this series and I looked at the runs, I was like, well, Tribe win that. But it is nice to dive into them, because now I'm like, oh, I don't know, packs, but yeah, either way, that's for the listeners, that's for the watchers.
There's some insane runs, but we're talking albums here.
Yeah.
So you have to think, which are the albums? There's some albums with dope songs on them. I know you're going to be discussing Redman and a few other people,
sure.
But have they got the cohesiveness, the pure synergy of A Tribe Called Quest, Midnight Marauders, from cover to artwork to sequencing? What is messing with that?
Yeah. And do you know what? I was going to ask for your 30-second conclusion, but I don't think I need to. I think you've kind of nailed it right there, Rob. But yeah, man, I mean, just to cap it all off, and when we look at Tribe now, and we're talking about this beautiful run and just the joyousness of being around that time, what do you think happened to Tribe after? Like, after this came out, where do you as a fan see them going? Where did they go after this?
So my anticipation for Beats, Rhymes and Life was 100% the most anticipated album in my hip hop buying fandom life. I literally, every magazine I bought, whether it was Hip Hop Connection, Rap Pages, The Source, any little news article about Beats, Rhymes and Life is almost finished.
Wow. Yeah.
Was like Nirvana to me. It was like, come on, bring it on. And it kind of almost came too late. So by the time it came out if it had come out in 95, alongside, Cuban Links and, all those classic 95 albums, the infamous
Mob. Yeah.
It would have been like perfection for me. By the time it came out, rap was already starting to shift a little bit. And Beats, Rhymes and Life, I used to have this in our car. We used to have like a CD player plugged into the jack, and the system wasn't amazing. And I remember going for that super loud snare that they then went for, the kind of Dilla sound, which I previously loved on, because I love Lab Cab in California more, excuse me, more than I love Bizarre Ride.
Right.
Well, I was like a JD fan, JD as he was at the time, so I wasn't prejudiced in any way. But it was a little bit, it didn't have that low end knock that I like. There was a few tracks on the album like Get a Hold, which is the sound that I really like. But then, and I don't like the lead single, Paul Ince Again. Like,
yeah,
as we called it at the time. We always called it Paul Ince Again because it looked like Ince.
Paul Ince Again.
That's a very specific joke. I'm sorry.
I loved it. Paul Ince Again. Loved that.
I didn't have a record, still don't.
Okay, that's interesting because I really enjoyed the Hop. I thought the Hop was probably one of my favourite Tribe tracks.
The Hop, Get a Hold, those two. That's the sound I like.
Exactly, and I think we kind of similar on that. And again, we talk about like the legacy of these runs and where you can hear that sound today and afterwards. You've kind of nailed it there with Dilla. Dilla definitely got something from these Tribe sessions and obviously Lab Cab and took them on to do his own thing.
As well,
Absolutely, man, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, you hear that Pharrell was in the sessions for Midnight Marauders, so that's there. You definitely know there's Kanye in there as well. I feel the legacy for this is up there with Outkast to say it's still here, as in you can still hear this here today. In a lot of places.
The whole movement in the early 2000s, Little Brother, that whole foreign exchange, all of that, which really the touchstone for all of that is A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
Whichever way you slice it and dice it, that is the touchstone for all of, and the whole of the Soulquarians movement.
For sure.
But, let's not forget, I mentioned Dwele earlier, Dwele, America, Common, like Water for Chocolate. Would that album exist without A Tribe Called? Common took a few albums to find out what he really wanted. He's still doing that. He's still all over the place. But that was the era. Whenever we indulged in that neo soul era, we always had one ear back to
Tribe.
And obviously Ali Shaheed was, you know, again, we don't mention him enough. Ali Shaheed was involved in that whole era. He took it through with Lucy Pearl and Raphael Sadiq, and that all, you know, that it was that mashing together of Raphael Sadiq from Tony and Ali Shaheed that really solidified a lot of what we now know as neo soul, and you know.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Where do you stand on the Thank You for Your Service 2016?
Absolutely love it. And you know what I love about Thank You for Your Service more than anything is because it wasn't a retread, and I felt that they didn't try to make a perfect album like Marauders. Let's make 14 perfectly tuned, EQ'd, engineered, Bob Power bangers. They went all over the place. That album was a bit more like Jungle Brothers done by the Forces of Nature. And
that's a great shout.
And it has some elements of Jungle Brothers' third album, which people don't like. But that album, for me, it was a perfect sort of full stop because it didn't try to be something it's not. It had elements of those albums, but it was loose, and it was kind of hard to define, and all of that helped, I think. Cover people really kind of slagged off. It was hard to define, and I think as a result, we don't I don't compare it. I just enjoy it. And I think for me as a huge fan, it was important that I could just enjoy it and not compare it. So well done. Thank you for your service to Tribe Podcast.
You beautifully put, man.
Doing that.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put. I feel like there's something with Thank You for Your Service that came at me like, for me, it's one of my favourite albums of the 10s. It really is. It's because I think that was the one album I'll go back 100%. Now. Yeah, and I'll go back there now and I'll be like, actually, you can be away for so long, come back and smash it, so no one has an excuse anymore. No one has an excuse now to not do this. And even if you don't stick the landing, like you said, they go for it. And another thing that I feel like they always have, like, the messaging in their run. They have this messaging, but in this they're so overtly political. But it came in 2016 when, honestly, I was here for that. I was receptive
100%.
to We the People, to tracks. Honestly, now I feel like, with the world being so crazy, in another 4 or 5 years, people will look back and go, God, yeah, that album absolutely nails it, you know.
And they did it in that Tribe Called Quest way, where they don't bang you over the head with it.
That's it.
They just, it worms its way in your body like an infection. Their messaging. It's very subtle.
Yeah.
You know, it was a little less subtle. It was a little more overtly political, but it still had that Tribe Called Quest class and subtlety. Meant that exactly what you said. You're going to go back to that album in 10 years' time, and you're going to hear things you didn't hear. I heard that album. I used to DJ every Thursday back in the days when we used to DJ.
Oh God, yeah.
And it dropped, so we played it in the car driving home, and obviously I was nervous. You know, nervous.
Yeah, I was.
And I was like, 3 tracks in, I was looking to my friend Tama, and we were going, yo, and we drove around. You know, we had about 40-minute journey back home from central London, and we drove around and listened to the whole album. Then we like sat in the car and rewound the first few tracks, and we were like,
wow.
It was like a sense of like,
yeah.
And I think it was we used to talk about this, myself and Mike Lewis from Lewis Recording used to talk about this a lot. Who will be like the Bob Dylan, the Johnny Cash, the Traveling Wilburys of hip hop, where a group comes back 15 years after their pomp or their peak, and has that album that is still has the essence and the elements of that group, but is still credible and can exist.
Yeah,
and we've had it recently with the Buster album again. It's done the same thing. Yeah, and we had it with 444. I mean, Jay-Z's a different one because Jay-Z's never really, much as he said he's retired, he never really retired. Whereas this was one of those albums where it was like, oh, this can be done. And I think we've had a lot more. Gangster. And it feels good. For hip hop, it feels, if hip hop ever needed to prove that it's the greatest music genre probably ever, it needed that, and it's got that now. So I'm sorry, all of the music genres, you're done out here.
but do you know what, you nailed there? Two things. First of all, you said there it's got the spirit and like that of Tribe. So big up Jorobi, by the way, because I know we haven't really talked about him so much, but we had him on the pod as well. He's such a
one of my favourite Crate 808s. Can I just say that?
Oh, thank you, Rob. Cheers, man. He was such a lovely bloke, and he's so at peace. That's the thing, and I feel that's so Tribe. That's so Tribe. Like, we'll just do what we want to do. So when I talked to him about thank you for your service, he did say he had a lot of input into that. So I feel like having that spirit was getting them all back together again, and just absolutely experimenting with features as well. Like, their features were crazy with Lamar, Kendrick, and loads of other people on there. So I feel like that definitely is there. And two, what you've said there is rap is still, well, not as much now, but it was a very young genre at the time and would get poo-pooed by a lot of people and be like, oh, no, I'm not sure about it, whatever, and get rinsed. But at the end of the day, rock had those times 30 years later when someone's dropping an album, you're like, Bob Dylan can still do it. I'm so glad we have an example and we can show other people and be like, actually, thank you for your service. Like, come on, they can still do it.
We had those 90s Rolling Stones albums that we had to pretend to care about when our parents liked them. You know? Now our kids are going to have to pretend to care about a Tribe Called Quest, Gangstar. Come on, bring it on.
I love that.
I'm shouting because I'm so passionate.
And I love that. I love it, Rob. But thank you for bringing this on, man. Thank you for this chat. It's been a long time coming. I've been begging to do Tribe, so I'm so glad I got to do this. Hopefully we're going to get a lot of feedback, I'm sure, on these runs generally. But we're gonna hit it up. We're gonna hit you up on IG hopefully as well. Get an IG live on the guy. I'd love to do that, man, with some people with some Q&As and stuff. Love to do that. But yeah, man, it just leaves me with one thing then, man. You've done your conclusion pretty much already. Yeah. Unless you've got something else to add to this run, I want to know, what's the last great thing Rob Pursey's heard? Because I know you're always heavy on the rotation with music, man.
This can be new or old, right?
Yeah, just the last thing you heard. That was, it can't be Tribe though, because we've talked about Tribe.
It's the stuff that my daughter plays me. Shiloh Dynasty or Dynasty, okay. Native American. She's the artist who's she does these kind of in almost like Instagram, just acoustic pieces, and they've been used by everyone. Like XXXTentacion, Jocelyn Flores that samples her, and I feel like she will go down as the Dilla of this generation. And the more my daughter plays of it, the more I'm just like, yeah, the youth just know. They just know.
Yeah, I'm always here for beats, like instrumental beats and beat tapes like that. So, yeah, Shiloh Dynasty. Any record in particular or anything in particular?
No, it's vocal, but just do it. It's basically, my daughter will listen. This is how it's a generational thing. She will listen to 1 hour Shiloh Dynasty, slowed and reverbed, with a little heart emojis in the YouTube, and that's the zone.
That's the zone. Wow, what a world! What a world!
All the comments will be like, "Who else cries when listening to this music?" And it's. And she's 12.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm part inspired and I'm part worried.
Oh man, that's brilliant though, man. Yeah, okay, Shiloh Dynasty. I will check that out, Rob. I will. But man, thank you again for this. Where can we check you out? Give us your socials and what you're up to next.
So I'm Rob Pursey on pretty much everything. ROBPURSEY. It's like Pursey with a Y on the end. I'm on that on Twitter, Instagram. In real life, I'm a very IRL person. Obviously, I DJ in the, hopefully if we get this vaccine or whatever. Yeah. I'm in the clubs 3 times a week. I run events in London. I run Players Ball, Rated R, hip hop karaoke every week. I'm active-ish on Twitter. More active at the moment because I'm at home all the time.
Oh, man, yeah.
I present a radio show on Soho Radio, big up Soho Radio. And I'm just passionate. I just care about music. And just like you, Cam, and all the other people we know.
Yeah.
That's what it's about, you know?
Yeah, man.
And so,
always here for it. Rob is downplaying his Twitter presence, man. I'm telling you now, because you're always going to get gems. I've said this every time you're on, mate, but it's true. Every time you drop something, oh, I've not heard that or whatever. Yeah, man.
yeah,
So I'm here for it.
You know? I like to share music. That's for me what Twitter is about. It's about a little perspective on something, but more importantly, it's like, oh, damn, someone really messes with this album. Yeah. I didn't really mess with this album. Let me go and check that again. You know, someone I respect say something, and that's what I love about the community on there. And long may that continue.
100%, man. 100%. What a great way to end it, man. Well, people, go check out Rob's stuff. Go to when the nights are back on. I'm ready to go out, Rob. I'm sure you are as well. Yes, I'm ready for a party. I'm ready for a party, like a week of partying. I'm ready, man. I'm 40, so I'm probably gonna last like a day. But yeah, but yes. Yeah, but yeah, man, check crate808.com for all the socials, get involved, subscribe to the newsletter, and go cop some merch. And yes, until the next time, Rob, I will catch you on the flip side, my bro.
Thank you, mate. Peace.
Peace.